Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, and welcome to episode 71 of the Art of Procurement and today's Friday show. Well, it was my son's third birthday last week, which is pretty crazy. Third birthday has come around already. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody really be so excited about an event. It really took me back to when I was a child, getting excited for my birthdays and getting excited for Christmas. And I really can't even imagine what he's going to be like come Christmas, because he's been talking about Santa coming down the chimney really since February. But what's this got to do with procurement, I hear you ask? Well, last Friday, I had one present left to buy, so I did my research, I checked out all the potential sources, I even did a total cost of ownership analysis. So when I took into account shipping costs, decision on where to purchase the item that I was looking for, which was a sandbox, was a pretty easy one. Just go to my local toy store. And in true procurement style, I also had a coupon, just made it a no-brainer. And the price of this item was $70. So I headed over to the store, bought the sandbox, no problems. It was just what I wanted. The issue was that I walked out of the toy store having not spent $70, but I spent $240. So I ended up, as you do, buying all manner of things that we didn't need for his birthday. Remember, this was just supposed to be the last gift. But, you get there and you just can't help yourself, or I certainly can't help yourself. Maybe it's just my self-control. But here I was, I'd done all my research, found the best price, saved myself at least $20 in the process over just buying online, which is pretty much what we do with everything else. And in doing so, I'd spent $150 more than I would have done had I just gone and ordered the item at the higher cost. So that got me thinking when I was really mapping out what I wanted to talk about in today's Friday show. And with all that in mind, I'm going to talk briefly about demand management and why getting the lowest possible price does not necessarily lead to you spending the less money. And before I do go into today's episode, I want to talk quickly about sponsorship, and I've talked about it a couple of times before. And I'm fortunate now that I do have sponsor partners who are helping me now to continue to invest in building and growing the show. But one of the key principles of the Art of Procurement is that I'm as transparent with you, the listener, about our revenue sources. And in my mind, it's really the only way to maintain the trust-based relationship that I think we have together. So every time that there is an advertisement in the Art of Procurement, in an Art of Procurement episode that's been paid for by a sponsor, you're going to hear some special ad music. That's really just our way of differentiating between the story and the content of the show and the advert. But at the Art of Procurement, we're only ever going to sign sponsorship deals with companies that we believe in. To me, there's no amount of money really worth putting at risk the reputation of the show for high quality content and for our relationship with you. And the other one last thing on this is that my aim is to make any advertisements as interesting to listen as the interview itself. And I know it's a lofty goal, but it's one that I've heard others be really successful with on the podcasts. That's definitely the aim for the Art of Procurement. Okay, so demand management. Demand management, I think, is often overlooked. It's a way to reduce total expenditure. It doesn't necessarily have an impact on pricing or on supplier margins. It can be through reducing the volume of purchases. It can be through using substitute products or services that really give you the same result but for less money. And today, I wanted to share 5 different ways to reduce spend through demand management. These are relevant, I think, to both direct and indirect categories, but I'm really focusing on the facets that are really relevant to both of them. So what's that mean? Well, I think there's a number of other levers on the direct side that I'm not going to touch on today. Alright, well, without further ado then, and in no particular order, let's go through those 5 different ways that I thought of for today's show. And the first way to reduce total expenditure through demand management is to undertake a thorough review of the scope or the statement of work for a product or a service. So it's not unusual for business stakeholders, at least in my experience, for them to scope out a piece of work which includes a lot of nice to haves, but they might not necessarily be required for the service being provided. On the direct side, it may include a product being over-engineered, for example. So have you scoped, or has the business scoped, a far more complex product or service than is necessary? An example that comes to mind would be for an engagement that includes, let's say, an element of consulting. And it's natural to request that the best people perform a particular job, but is it really necessary based on what you're buying to have, as an example, senior level consultants or partners even doing the work when a more junior level consultant will be appropriate for the service being bought? And another example could be language requirements in a call center. So are you requiring that your supplier provides local language support for all of your major locations when you're a global company and this is an internal call center where employees are all comfortable in speaking English? A second consideration is to use substitute products or services. So could you break up, as an example, a service into multiple parts or sourcing different pieces to different companies? And an example, which is a continuation of the consulting theme, is you might have a piece of work that requires a consulting firm to solve a particular business problem, and then you need a large-scale kind of implementation on the back end of helping to put into practice whatever the solution is determined to be. And in this case, you could source the problem-solving piece to a more strategic consultant, higher-cost consultant, and then the implementation to a specialist project management firm, as an example, or a BPO firm, or a more of a niche consultant who may be lower cost. Another example is in legal services. So all matters related to supporting a court case may have been sourced to a law firm in the past, and you end up having expensive lawyers doing things like pre-case discovery research. But what you can do instead is to use your law firm to support the bulk of the case, but then source a specialist legal discovery firm to do all that time-consuming research that is needed rather than the law firm itself. Or you can kind of have your law firm subcontract, so they still maintain the overall responsibility for the delivery, but within that engagement you have part of it done by the law firm itself, part of it done by the legal discovery firm. That's just an example, but I've seen companies save 70-80% by doing this, and it has no impact on the margins, particularly of the law firm. It just means that you're shifting work to the people who are best placed to do it at the best price. Okay, the third way that I thought of was to take a look at your SLAs. So are the metrics that you have in place that you require your supplier to meet, are they too aggressive? Again, are they representing a nice to have? Is it some perfect world situation? Is it the same metrics if it's something you've outsourced that you would actually expect your internal team to perform at? In my experience, most SLA metrics are too aggressive because, it's pretty easy to do it. All it means is, all it needs is for you to just change what says in the RFP, change what's in the SOW. It's just a number. So it's not something that takes a particularly lot of time for you to require your supplier to perform against metrics which may be a lot higher than is actually what's necessary based on what it is that's being purchased. And then you can compound that by tying financial penalties on the supplier based on the attainment of those SLAs. And the ability to achieve those then, often that comes at a steep price for the supplier, and then that obviously has a knock-on effect on price. So if we use a call center example again, it could be that you have a metric that, say, requires the firm that you outsourced your IT help desk to answer the phone within 3 seconds. But what would happen if you change that to 5 seconds? Really, not a lot. But it would make the metric much easier for the supplier to achieve, and likely reduce the number of staff that they have around at any one time, just waiting for the phone to ring. Fourth is to look at areas where you're at risk of making duplicate purchases, or maybe you're buying too much of what you actually need. An example here is, do you have a good handle on the number of software licenses that are being purchased across your organization for a particular software product? It could be that you have too many people buying a license for a product that they don't need, or maybe you're buying new licenses when you have existing ones that can be transferred without incurring additional costs. Or another way of thinking about it could be if you have multiple suppliers providing the same product or service, where it's not really a strategic necessity or where it's not needed as part of risk mitigation, for example. So, for example, do you have multiple janitorial suppliers or office supplies partners or travel management companies even? And if you do, then it may not seem like it's that much cost involved in doing that. But ultimately, you're paying for duplicated efforts within that engagement, such as account management, that could be reduced if you were to consolidate to a single supplier. So that right there would be another demand management opportunity. And then finally, this is the fifth, and I left this one to last because it's often the quickest to implement, it has the fastest results, but it's the most unwelcomed by users, and it doesn't particularly paint procurement in a favourable light. And that's to manage demand through policy changes and approval processes. And I'm going to use corporate travel here as an example. You could make policy changes that range from an outright travel ban in an extreme case to a change in the class of travel or hotel quality, perhaps different rental car sizes, the number of stopovers that you require your travelers to take, any number of different policies from a travel perspective. Or you can implement stricter approval processes that require, say, vice president approval on any international travel or on flights over a certain spend threshold. And I did both of these while I was a corporate travel buyer earlier in my career. And I'll say that, they are effective in managing demand and in managing cost, but it's not pretty. If you ever want to see what it's like to be a human verbal punch bag, then get a job buying corporate travel and then tell all your travelers that they have to make a stopover. They have to travel on low-cost airlines rather than those that have loyalty programs. And now you have to stay in 3-star hotels rather than 5-star hotels. But very effective in reducing cost. So in summary, here are 5 different ways that I think we can start to consider demand management, particularly coming from that indirect perspective. First, to look for over-engineered or bloated specifications. Next is to consider substitute products or services, at least for part of your requirements. Third is to review your SLAs and ask if they're too aggressive for what you really need. Fourth is to consider areas where you're at risk from making duplicate purchases or where it just makes sense to consolidate your suppliers. And the last one is to review your purchasing and your approval processes. So let me know what I've missed. What have you used? What tactics and strategies have you used to manage demand for the categories that you buy? I'd love to hear from you. You can comment over at artofprocurement.com/demand management. That's artofprocurement.com/demand management, or ping me on Twitter. And the handle is at AOP Show. That's all one word. That's at AOP Show. All right then. Well, thank you very much for listening. And I will talk to you again next week. I'll be back on Tuesday with another interview show. Have a great weekend. Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.